It's clear from driving along this prom that work on the highway is long overdue. Now, Phil Gawne, who's with me, has come up with a radical proposal which will completely transform this area. Phil, we're just driving along Loch Prom. We've come through the first set of traffic lights. What will we see in front of us here?
Well, I think we will see quite a markedly different promenade. We will see a promenade without controls like lighting controls, but a much the design of the promenade will be such that people will feel that they need to drive slower. They will need to take much more care about their driving. The principle behind all this is that we want to ensure that everyone gets the best possible use out of the promenade. So there'll be more space for pedestrians, significantly more than there currently is. There will also be more parking spaces available at this end of the promenade, and we will have safer access across the road for pedestrians.
So as we're driving along here, I mean, we've been through several sets of traffic lights already to take us the length of Loch Prom. They'll all be disappearing, won't they?
Yes, and I think, I know we've had some concerns expressed to us by primarily off-island support groups for disabled people, particularly blind or partially sighted people. I think a number of these groups haven't actually seen the design of our scheme, but there have been some concerns about these sorts of schemes elsewhere where they've been done. So I understand that people have concerns, but I believe that the design features that we're incorporating should be sufficient to alleviate those concerns. Certainly we're continuing to work very closely with various support groups for the blind and partially sighted to try and make sure that what we do design works best for the people, for those people, and indeed for everybody concerned.
Okay, now as we come up here, we're just passing the Villa Marina and we're coming up to the traffic lights at the bottom of Broadway. This is going to look quite different, isn't it, down here?
Yes, again, many people will have spent many a happy hour stuck at these traffic lights, where in reality a very large sort of round area will be created if the new scheme gets approval, which will allow people to drive in whichever direction they particularly want to drive. It will be designed in such a way that there are no obvious and direct controls, no lines pointing people in certain directions, no lanes specifying which lane you have to be in and how you must do this, that and the other. But it's designed in such a way that people will naturally want to take care and will naturally try and work with other drivers, other road users.
And as we get further down the prom now, we're coming up to the hotels down here in the Castlemona shops. What will we see in this area?
Well, this part of the scheme, once we get past the bottom of Broadway, we move on to a less attractive design. It's still going to be a fairly radically different design, but it's not going to have quite the same level of paving and all the other bits that we would perhaps have liked to have included, and that's primarily because we don't have enough money to do that for the full length of the promenade. The actual cost to do the full, absolutely super duper wet bells and whistles job was something like £27 million, and we've pulled that back to 21.5 million, which was the original amount budgeted for. So as a result of that, we've had to reduce some of the aspects of the scheme. The other important thing, of course, to note is that the tram tracks will be or a single tram track, and that will be effectively at the side of the walkway, and in places it will be actually on the walkway. That again has resulted in some concern, but in the way that we're designing this change, we should end up with more pedestrian space than we've currently got, which I think is a positive of the scheme, which those people who are currently criticising it because of this element possibly haven't recognised, and maybe when the scheme is actually built, assuming it gets permission, they will see a better scheme than perhaps they think.
And as we get now, I've just looped round the bottom of Summerhill to come back down, where we've got the tram station on our left-hand side. Is anything going to be happening down here at the very end here?
Effectively, this is the end of the scheme, round about this junction. So the tram tracks will be diverted across the road. Where they are diverted across the road will be clearly marked, and that will be the obvious end of the regen works on the promenade. Again, we're talking about £21.5 million scheme. Sounds like an awful lot of money. Indeed, it is an awful lot of money. But there's a huge amount of work required. I mean, you can only tell as we're bumping along the promenade here, this is not just a superficial surfacing job that needs doing. There are major structural problems with the promenade,
as we can feel.
Absolutely, and that is really underneath the surface. There are weaknesses in the foundations that need to be resolved, and that does cost a lot of money. We're looking at probably between 1 and 2 meters depth at least, that needs to be taken out before we can rebuild the promenade for much of the promenade here. Added to which, of course, shifting the tram tracks is going to cost money, but people who say, well, why not just leave the tram tracks alone, are missing the point that you can't do the sort of scale of civil engineering that we need to do here and leave the tram tracks in the place that they currently are. So we would have to shift the tracks, and if you're going to relay the tracks, you may as well relay them in a place which is more suitable for their use. And I certainly know that the people who operate the trams on a day-to-day basis believe that they're more likely to pick up passing trade if they are in a much safer location at the side of the road than they would if they were in the middle of the road as they currently are. So I think there are a lot of positives with this. I'm under no illusions that there will be that inevitably people who will object to the scheme. It is a very, very big scheme. It is fundamental to the look of Douglas, and it is going to be a real challenge to persuade everybody, or it was always going to be a challenge to persuade everyone to support it.
I think because it's a radical scheme. Is there a fear that this might be watered down in some way, because it won't work, will it? I mean, this is an all or nothing, really, isn't it?
Yes, if you start watering the scheme down in any way, the sort of thing you would do would be to introduce traffic controls. Once you start doing that, you undermine the whole psychology of the scheme, and the psychology is really quite crucial to this. What the scheme is designed to do is make drivers think that they're driving in a more dangerous space. By making them think that, they will automatically drive more carefully and be far more responsive and understanding of the needs of other road users. So once you start changing that, even in just a small way, you then end up going back towards a more conventional traffic scheme, in which case you'd have to do the total redesign, which I really hope that we don't have to go back to. What we've come forward with is something that is going to be, in my view anyway, a really inspiring scheme. It will help improve highways design on the island, and as far as Douglas is concerned, it'll boost the value of the properties on the promenade. It will provide a far more accessible promenade for both motorists and pedestrians, and I'm obviously very supportive of what we've now come forward with.
And in terms of the consultation, I think you seem to have made some of the businesses down here a little bit happier than they were with the previous scheme. What's been the general feeling from people?
Yeah, we've had really very positive feedback from Chamber of Commerce, retailers, hoteliers, who have thanked us for listening. I mean, there are still some areas where they would like to see things done differently, and some of those areas I think we're going to be able to accommodate in minor changes to the scheme. But generally it has been very well received. So we've got Douglas Borough Council of support of the scheme, we've got the Chamber of Commerce support of the scheme, hoteliers, retailers supportive, and at the moment, based on my inbox, a kind of a 50-50 split between the other users of the promenade as to whether they like the scheme or whether they don't.
And when will this be coming before Tynwald for approval?
Well, first of all, we would need to seek planning permission, and again, I'm not making any assumptions that we're definitely going to get planning permission, but we'll be going for planning permission at the end of this month. Then, hopefully, if everything goes well, we would be aiming to get Tynwald approval in October, in which case we would start the works round about November of this year. If all goes well, we should be finished in about 3.5 years' time, but we've programmed in a 5-year scheme because inevitably there will be snags along the way. We don't know what the weather's going to do. We don't know what other unforeseen circumstances there may be. So, it's a bold scheme, imaginative scheme, and I do hope people will support it.